want her?
I think my microphone's working. So welcome to our Banc.
Or you're most comfortable?
I know I need a thumbs up from you. I just wanted to welcome everyone here to our Banc. And we're good, we're live? Okay, good. Welcome everyone. We appreciate our friends from the County Commission being here with us today to discuss some important matters. Before we get to that, I believe the County Commission needs to take roll call, so I will recognize the co-chair, Commissioner Meissner. I almost called you a council member for a second. It took me. Okay. I'll be drinking more coffee, so I'll be better. But Commissioner Meissner, for roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Small formality. We'll call the meeting to order of the County Commission on today, Tuesday, September 28th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Present.
Present. Present.
Present. And with that, Mayor, thanks for inviting us over. It's nice to be here and see you all. So we'll hand the meeting back to you.
Excellent. Well, with that, I will we'll jump in on the agenda. Madam Clerk.
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting on September 21st, 2021.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes, and if so, is there any discussion on the minutes? If there is no discussion on the minutes, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 14.
Is there any discussion on the consent agenda items 1 through 14? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to pull item number 13, the second reading of Racing Ordinance 51-640.
Item number 14 will be pulled in place
13.
for 13 will be pulled and discussed directly following this item. Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to pull items 10 and 11, please.
Items 10 and 11 will be pulled, and they will follow item 13 for discussion after this item. Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? If there is no further discussion, then I will make a motion that we pass the consent agenda with the exceptions of items 13, 10, and 11. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The chair recognizes Councilmember Fry for discussion on item number 13.
Thank you, sir. So last week, we had the first reading on the ordinance related to street racing, and I received several concerns from neighbors voicing concern about the innocent party being accused of spectating. And asking legal to weigh in on it. I know that they made an amendment to exempt a person who happens to witness the activity. I think that'd be good to hear from them as related to that amended wording, so we can take it up as a possible change to the ordinance.
Of course.
The intent was never to, of course, include an unintentional spectator, but to clarify the intent of the ordinance. The following sentence has been added to the definition of spectator. Unintentional witnesses or passerbys to events are not considered spectators, as a spectator is one who attends an event for the purpose of viewing it. We believe that this makes the ordinance very clear and should present an issue.
And I will second the amendment, which I believe we need. Is this correct?
Right, yeah, I think, again, I appreciate legal weighing in, and everyone who's reached out. I don't believe that WPE was ever going to intentionally target anyone who just happened to be present or witness illegal street racing, but this additional language gives me some relief that I think that won't happen. And so with that, I move that the changes recommended by the law department be made to the ordinance by amendment, and the ordinance be passed as amended on second reading.
And I'll second the motion or second the amendment or the motion, and also to speak to the motion. I think it's very important that we make a difference or set in policy a clear difference between what a witness is and what someone who gathers for for the intent to encourage illegal activity. We do know that back in 2019, we had 3 people that we know of who have died in Wichita because of street racing. We have others who have died who we believe speed was a factor, but because of lack of witnesses coming forward, we're not sure if that was street racing or not. So we want to encourage witnesses, if you are witnessing unlawful behavior, to be able to report on it and not be in fear that somehow you witnessing that makes you liable for the incident itself. So I appreciate this amendment, and I'm happy to second it. And with that, the changes in the motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion on these proposed changes? If there is none, then the motion has been made and seconded. See no discussion. All in favor of said motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it, and the ordinance is passed as amended. On to item number 10, and then on to item number 11. The chair recognizes Vice Mayor Johnson for discussion.
Thanks, Mayor. On both item 10 and 11, I need to abstain due to a personal conflict.
Items 10 and 11. I believe we have to pass them one at a time, so I'll make a motion to pass item 10. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Councilmember Bluebog. With that, all in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Let the clerk please note that Vice Mayor Johnson has abstained. On to item number 11, Vice Mayor Johnson.
Due to a personal conflict, I need to abstain from this item as well.
With that, I'll make the motion to pass item 11. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by Councilmember Bluebog. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Please let the record reflect the Vice Mayor has abstained. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated September 27th, 2021.
I did it again.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here for the September 27th Board of Bid recommendations. First purchasing bid we have is uniforms for water utilities, deferred to October 11th Board of Bids. Cleaning of piping network for Gilbert and Mosley, Mayor Specialty Services for $74,435. Grinding and removal of wood chips from Brooks Landfill, Smithing Environmental Services for the Group 1 base bid of $1.25 per cubic yard. Valves, angle and brass low lead, core and main for $84,386.50. Mowing and haying floodway rebid, no bids were received. Supply and install AV equipment at various locations, Conference Technologies for $50,000. Velocity pumpers and velocity aerial apparatus, Conrad Fire Equipment for $3,275,108.65. The Q2 infrastructure bid report is the $6.9 million of the infrastructure bids totaled the 12 million bids awarded in Q2 for 2021. This is a breakdown of the number of bids per month and the amount of bids that were awarded during those months. This is the funding source that was for Q2 and the amounts. And then finally, we have the total purchasing payments for the minority and EBE reports. The all minority and EBE payments were $12,291,935. The minority and minority EBE payments were $10,107,734 for a total percentage of payments to minority and EBE vendors of 16.8%. This is the purchasing procurement website, as well as our current open request for proposals. That is the Board of Bids recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions of staff. Councilmember Cirillo.
Can you go back to the mowing and haying where no bids were received? Is there an explanation as to what that is and where it is? I just want to make sure that we aren't missing out on mowing and haying. I get complaints all the time about areas not being mowed.
So this particular bid is for the Stormwater Division. It's the mowing and haying of the floodway. We have bid this twice with no bids received. So I believe the intent is the department's going to go visit with some vendors to see if we can't get some vendors interested in doing the mowing and haying of it.
So this is the big ditch? When you say floodway, the big ditch?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Further questions of staff? Discussion? If there's no further questions or discussion, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Clerk will not open the roll. Members will respond with a yay for yes. All in favor? Aye. Yay. All opposed, same sign. The yays or ayes have it. They do have it. Madam Clerk.
Approval of travel for Councilmember Brian Fry to attend the Community Leaders of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota, October 6th through 8th, 2021.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to, for the record, indicate that this travel is paid for by Community Leaders of America, no expense to the city.
Any further discussion on this travel?
Are they paying you round trip?
I knew that was coming. I should have said that, right?
That's why they're paying. Further, further discussion. If there's no further discussion, then I'll make the motion to send Councilmember Fry out of town. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. All in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk,
Councilmember appointments and comments.
there are no appointments at this time. Councilmember Blubach.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to appoint Laura Rainwater to the Ethics Advisory Board.
Is there any further appointments? If there is no more further appointments, then I'll make the motion to accept the appointments.
Second.
Motion is seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. All in favor of said appointments, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Back on Councilmember comments. Is there any? Councilmember Fry.
One quick comment. Anyone who has ever done any event in downtown Wichita knows Lieutenant Donnie Phelps. He recently retired from our Wichita Police Department after 32 years of service. His last act was the downtown chili cook-off on Saturday. He delayed his retirement in order to serve that event. So I just want to give a shout out to Donnie Phelps. Thank you.
Further comments? If there are no more comments on this item, then we will go into our en banc. Madam Clerk.
Arpa funding prioritization.
Mayor, Chairman, what we're going to do is a presentation from the city regarding the community engagement process that we followed for the spending of ARPA funds that have been allocated to the city. And then county staff will give a similar presentation, and then we're hoping the council and the commission will have some discussion regarding priorities and opportunities for us to work together.
Sounds good.
With that, I'd like to ask Mark Manning to come up.
So staff's here, right? Yeah. Chair recognizes Director Manning for an overview of the ARPA funding prioritization.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council, Chairman Meissner, welcome back. Members
Morning,
of the
Mark.
County
Good to see you
Commission.
again.
I'm Mark Manning. I'm with the Department of Finance with the City of Wichita. Today, I want to give you an overview of the ARPA, or American Recovery Plan Act funding for the city of Wichita, talk about our conceptual spending plans, and talk about our engagement process that we've employed here. So the city ARPA allocation is approximately $72.4 million. We've received about half of that, or about $36 million, earlier in June of this year, and we would expect to receive the other half in June of 2022. So the city developed conceptual spending plans for the ARPA funding, and we did this concurrently with our budget process, which, as you know, runs through August. So we identified a variety of concepts for ARPA. We aligned them to the ARPA categories, and that was the strategy behind our plan. Having said that, I will point out that, as you know, the lost revenue category of ARPA is by far the most general category, and we believe at the city that all of our funding will be qualified under the lost revenue category. For example, in 2020, our lost revenue, based on the federal calculations, was $28.3 million, or roughly 40% of our $72 million allocation. So that gives the city a great deal of flexibility. Having said that, the concepts that I'm going to show you are also aligned to the ARPA spending categories. I think in contrast to the county, I would suspect their lost revenue is probably not quite as high as ours for a variety of reasons. So this represents the ARPA spending plan. Again, this should look familiar to you. We've talked about this a lot during the budget process. Again, this is our conceptual plan, so I'll go through it briefly. We've allocated $14.2 million for rehiring government staff. The city's held a number of positions vacant during the pandemic, and this will allow us to strategically fill positions in order to address some areas where we had some service erosion. We've also allocated $4.5 million for specific initiatives. This includes $500,000 each year for the Violence Interrupter Program, and it also includes $1 million a year for fire optimization response. We have allocated $23 million for infrastructure projects. These were incorporated in the CIP that you adopted on August 24th, and these are primarily for police and fire stations, and also some library improvements in impacted communities. I'll jump down to the bottom there. We have allocated about $11 million to support the general fund, particularly for revenue issues that we are anticipating in 23 or 24. Obviously, we hope not to need that money, but currently our long-term forecast includes $11 million in ARPA funding to help stabilize the general fund. That leads me to the line that's the second from the bottom, which is the amount that we've allocated to offset the negative economic impact of the coronavirus, and that is $20 million. And I'll probably spend the rest of my time today focused primarily on that category. So we initially engaged the City Council on April 8th at a retreat. You may recall that we went over what we knew about ARPA at the time, which some of our information at that time was relatively tentative. We talked about what we expected the permissible uses to be. We talked about what we expected the restrictions on use to be. And we talked about some guiding principles, particularly from GFOA. Particularly two that we talked about were that ARPA funding is probably best used for non-recurring items to the extent possible, since the amount of ARPA is finite. And we also talked about the guiding principle of coordinating with other entities that had ARPA funding in the interest to try to augment and not duplicate funding in other areas. So on August 8th, staff introduced 4 concepts to offset the negative economic impacts in our community. And this was to allocate funding for strategies in affordable housing, small business and entrepreneurial development, workforce development and training, and smart manufacturing and digital transformation. So as I noted, we had a workshop in April. We also had another workshop or a retreat on May 25th, in which we talked about these additionally. These were incorporated in the proposed budget that the manager submitted on July 20th, and ultimately these concepts and this allocation of funding was included conceptually in the budget that you adopted. So one thing that was important about ARPA was seeking engagement. So I wanted to outline some of our engagement efforts here. We had public comment at our budget hearings, and a lot of that was focused on these ARPA allocations. We had a public hearing on July 20th. We had an evening meeting on April 5th in order to facilitate public comment. We also had August 5th. We also had a public hearing on August 17th. We received a lot of feedback in all of those hearings. We also went to our district advisory boards. We did that in June primarily. One, I think, spilled over into July. At those meetings, we, again, outlined these concepts and we solicited feedback on which of these do you think are most important. And I'll go over that feedback momentarily. And finally, the city has a long history of using social media to gather feedback. We've done that now for about 10 years. So we used our social media channels and solicited feedback in that manner. So let me summarize some of this feedback. At the district advisory boards, we asked the members to basically rank the ideas that we had presented. And workforce development and affordable housing were clearly the ones that were on the top of the heap as far as the district advisory boards were concerned, although we did have one district advisory board that favored small business development. Notably, interest in smart manufacturing digital transformation was relatively weak at the district advisory boards. On social media, again, we use Facebook and Twitter primarily. The feedback was centered around affordable housing, and our public feedback, particularly at our council meetings, also was centered around affordable housing. So based on that, at the August 17th budget presentation, staff narrowed the focus a little bit to those three concepts: affordable housing, workforce development, and small business. So I want to talk about those briefly here in the next couple of slides, and then I'll wrap up. I'll talk about what the scope is in those areas and what our timeline is and what potential strategies might be. So affordable housing, we know we have challenges in this area. Wichita is a very affordable community if you look across the United States. Having said that, there is a shortage of quality affordable housing in Wichita. This aligns with previous strategies the city had employed, particularly the Places for People concept that we've been working on for a while. So this is not new to us, but we have formed a committee, and they're studying this issue, and we've engaged a consultant. Affordable housing in Wichita also is exacerbated by transportation challenges. As you know, we're not a very dense city. So all of that contributes to the affordable housing challenges that we have here. Again, our task force is looking at other cities who have addressed similar issues in the past and trying to develop recommendations. Again, nothing certain at this point, but that could include low interest financing, it could include gap financing, it could include potentially public infrastructure to facilitate the construction of affordable housing. Again, at this stage, everything's in the conceptual stage, but affordable housing is definitely one of the important concepts that we've allocated ARPA funding to. At this point, we don't have any specific program timelines, but again, the committee is meeting at this time. Talk about workforce development. We know a skilled workforce is essential to our local economy, particularly in the aerospace industry and cluster, but it's also crucial to our efforts to develop other clusters, which is one of our strategies here at City of Wichita. The pandemic kind of caused a double whammy. It reduced the number of skilled workers through layoffs and other employment actions, but it also accelerated technological advancements in the industry, and we saw that here at City of Wichita for that matter. The pandemic forced us to address operations different technologically, and that we believe has created challenges in the workforce development area. So staff currently is developing program criteria in which we would seek funding opportunities with in the community to provide workforce development training. Again, nothing certain at this point, but this could include retraining or apprenticeships or on-the-job work programs or other employment support. We expect to be finished with this effort in the fourth quarter of 2021, and we hope to be able to start putting money out in the first quarter of 2022. That funding could extend for up to 3 years. Small business development, very similar situation. Many small businesses were impacted. To state the obvious, a lot of those in the aerospace industry. There's problems with decreased demand, again, particularly in aerospace, but in a variety of other small businesses too. Staff retention problems, increased costs, so significant impact on small business due to the pandemic. Again, we're developing criteria in this area on how we can assist small business and what that looks like. Could include things like funding for support services or revolving loans or a variety of other ideas. Similar to workforce development, staff is currently developing proposals in order to solicit ideas on what we can do. We expect to have those done in the fourth quarter of 2021, and we would seek to allocate funding in the first quarter of 2022. Thought I'd point out that the city puts a variety of information out on the internet. I mentioned, I think, that we have subject matter expert videos. A couple of them are highlighted there. They're about short 2-minute videos on the concepts that I outlined previously, and we use those in our social engagement efforts. Those are available on YouTube. You can also link to them from our city Facebook page or from our Twitter page. We have a special site on our city website for ARPA information. Specifically, we have our recovery plan there, which we submitted to the federal government on August 31st. That plan basically is a summary of what I just told you right here, and that's what we submitted to the federal government, and that's available on the internet. And obviously, we'll post additional information out there as it is available. Mayor, that is the end of my formal presentation, and I would be happy to address any questions.
Is there questions of staff? Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. So just a couple of quick questions. In regards to affordable housing, how was the committee developed and who is on it?
I'm sorry, how's it connected to what?
How was the committee for affordable housing, how was that developed and who is on it?
Actually, Sally might be better served to answer that question.
Good morning, Director Stein.
Good morning, members of council, members of the commission. I'm happy to be here today to answer any questions. So we do have a pretty diverse committee. It was selected by, actually by committee, got a group of our knowledgeable professionals together. So we have representatives from the city, so the planning department, the city manager's office, myself, of course. But we also have representatives from our affordable housing development groups such as Habitat for Humanity, Mennonite Housing, the Health Foundation. We tried to make sure that we had a diverse group of people with different perspectives on the committee that are helping us work with our development strategies, who's been hired as our consultant to usher us through this process.
So outside of the people who are professionals and doing the work, are there any people who have experienced this that are going to be sitting on this committee?
Well, we haven't really targeted, there's no targeted demographic. It's not necessarily that this is housing specifically for any homeless population or elderly housing. So because there's not an identified demographic, we don't necessarily have a representative in that respect. But we lean on the experience of housing providers such as Habitat and the Housing Department.
But once the committee develops their plan, they probably will find focus areas. At that time, will you consider putting on people who have lived experience with this?
Absolutely. As we move forward, we're looking at ways to leverage not just the funding that's provided here, but looking at other resources and opportunities. So if, once we start down the path, and if we're looking at, home ARP funds that are specific to homelessness, we definitely want to bring in those groups.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my next question really isn't related to that. It's more about how your funding plan is laid out. Can we go back to the slide that is number 3?
This slide?
So in regards to this plan, how do these focus areas fit into that?
Those focus areas are in the negative economic impact initiatives category.
So a total of 20 million for these 3 focus
Yes,
areas?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All right, Madam Clerk.
We're gonna,
Oh, I'm trying to pass the floor over to to the county needs assessment analyst.
very good. Chairman, you want to kick it off or you want me to?
Please do. Floor is yours.
Just to follow up, we'll do a similar presentation now on the county side of ARPA spending plan. Our assistant CFO, Brent Shelton, will lead the presentation, but our CFO is also in the room if there are questions.
morning, Brent. Welcome to the meeting.
Good morning, Chairman Meitzner, Mayor Whipple, members of the Sedgwick County Commission and the Wichita City Council. For the record, I'm Brent Shelton, the Deputy CFO for Sedgwick County, and I'd like to spend the next few minutes just giving you a high-level summary of where the county is and how we have gone about working through and handling the $100 million direct allocation that we received as a result of the American Rescue Plan Act. As Mr. Manning pointed out, there were some specific areas within these public allocations where gives us a framework within which to spend the dollars. That's responding to and recovery from the public health emergency, as Mr. Manning spoke about, replacing public sector revenues, infrastructure, premium pay to essential workers, with a special focus on addressing systemic public health and economic challenges to typically disadvantaged populations. Now, while we received an allocation or an award of $100 million, we've received, just like the city, the first half of that money. So we've received $50 million, and of that we have prepared a spending plan that's allocating almost $43 million of those funds. The process that the county has gone through in order to determine needs began with an internal needs assessment. We asked departments and divisions within the county, what do you need for the immediate response to and recovery from the pandemic? That was conducted in May of this year, and in June, and then in July, and then subsequently in September, a spending plan for the first $43 million was approved by the County Commission. Between May and the end of June, we engaged members of the community through an external needs assessment. It was an online survey, and we had about 1,500 people prioritize for us their top 6 items out of 15 ARPA eligible expenditure categories. We followed that up with some in-depth focus groups. We hosted 6 across the community where we took a deeper dive and looked at more specific recommendations within those priorities that were established in the external needs assessment. And we have an ongoing needs assessment on our website where we are continuing to collect public information and public comment about the needs and the opportunities with ARPA funding. Now I'm going to summarize what was reported and what our findings were as we went through these processes, but formal reports are all available at sedgwickcounty.org on our website. If you go to the ARPA funding block there, you can click and it will provide you with information about that internal survey report. What did the departments tell us? It gives us the initial ARPA 2021 spending plan. As Mr. Manning indicated, a recovery plan performance report was provided to the U.S. Treasury both by the city and the county as of the end of July. That's available, as well as a needs assessment executive summary, which talks about those community findings. You can also click there to take the survey, and as additional funding opportunities become made available, they'll be posted on the website, because we've got a lot of community partners that are out there looking for other opportunities for ARPA funding, and those opportunities will be made available here. A quick highlight of the internal spending plan that was developed. This was, as I said earlier, approved by the County Commission on September 8th. It's $42,980,000, has been currently allocated of the initial $50 million tranche that we received. The top 3 expenditure categories, although they're organizational and internal spending, all reach out into the community. $9.3 million was allocated to our public health response, and about $9 million of that is in vaccination and testing efforts that continue across the county. Our judicial system was pretty much at a standstill during 2020, so $9.7 million has been allocated to a criminal court backlog of about 1,300 cases. And we're looking at that, and at the same time, a pretty significant increase, about 80%, in those serious types of crimes. So a big focus on getting people adjudicated and through the process. And finally, as was outlined in the American Rescue Plan Act, premium pay for those essential workers, and $20 million of our initial tranche has been allocated to providing premium pay for our first responders, those folks whose jobs didn't allow them to work remotely. They were on the front lines. They were continuing to provide public service in that manner. About 1,500 people responded to that external needs assessment, and they gave us a top 4 items that were prioritized out of that list of 15 ARPA-eligible expenditure areas. What the responses told us were that small business and nonprofits assistance was number 1. They want the ability, some resources provided to them to be able to continue to safely operate. There were some efforts last year made, the city's Open Streets Wichita program, the safe operating grants that the county offered. Those types of supports are still needed by small business and nonprofit organizations. Community violence intervention was the second priority that was mentioned, and this is specifically in the area of housing insecurity, homelessness, affordable housing, things like lead-based paint remediation, but specifically around housing and how that can be addressed using ARPA revenues. Mental health care services, particularly to vulnerable populations, was mentioned as the third category. And then premium pay both to public and private sector employees was the fourth priority that we received in those external needs assessments. So then within that backdrop, we engaged in those focus groups. And through the Greater Wichita Partnership, there has been a COVID task force that's been formed across the community involving business, government, nonprofit sectors. There's some folks in the room today that serve on that COVID task force. With the structure that was developed in terms of subcommittees that go out and look for other ARPA opportunities, we devised the focus groups around these 5 areas, dealing with travel and tourism, an industry that was heavily hit during the height of the pandemic. Community health, focus was given to economic development, business and workforce development. And you can see the others. We did add a group for local government because $12 million was directly allocated to the other 19 cities in the county. And then another session for folks that couldn't make those, that we would cover any topic. But across the community, folks gathered with focuses on these different areas. And they were asked specifically, where are you now in terms of your recovery? What are your immediate and longer range needs that ARPA might be able to help with? And specifically, are you looking to other funding sources? How can ARPA be of assistance to you? As these focus groups convened, we got some themes. Workforce challenges was the #1 theme across every group. We've all seen stories about restaurants closing because they can't get people to come to work. People are experiencing obstacles being able to re-enter the workforce. So it went across both from the point of view of the employer and the employer, potential employee, that workforce challenges was the #1 area that the focus groups found. Tied with that was child care services, the need for expanded child care services. And a couple of things were pointed out in the focus group that are unique challenges at this time. One was that because most child care places were closed during 2020, There's now a backlog of trying to get recertified and getting child care centers reopened, and the infrastructure at the state level isn't keeping up. So that's causing a 60 to 90-day delay in terms of getting inspections done. The second thing that we have found is that there's an increased need for non-traditional work hours for providing child care. Healthcare workers are working second and third shift and don't have child care options available to them, adding to that workforce challenge for those folks that are helping respond to the healthcare crisis. And those in the industry are talking about recognizing a need to pay more money to the child care providers, specifically because of those non-traditional hours and trying to bring people back into the workforce. Finding the best ARPA funding was another item that the focus groups are looking for assistance with. $100 million to the county, $72 million to the city, that's a lot of money, but that's part of a $1.9 trillion package. So while it's a lot of money, it's a small portion of what might be available. Assistance with finding the best places to find those resources. Again, the grants for businesses and nonprofits to safely operate. Mental health services came up and spoke to, as schools are reopening, some additional mental health stressors there. And there was a pretty strong consensus that the county needed to continue funding that testing and vaccination efforts, that full reopening is not going to occur until we hit that 70% threshold. In the local government sector, there was an interest in braiding funding, maybe city and county funding for infrastructure projects, water and sewer, maybe broadband, as well as looking at other places to, other sources of ARPA funding. The first initiative that the county has taken on outside of a specifically internal or organizational need is a request for proposal has gone out last week for a community navigator program. We've allocated $500,000 to stand this program up. It's anticipated that that would be at this point about a 12-month program. And in its simplest terms, it's just we're looking for an organization to provide us with resources to connect those with needs to those that have available resources. We're looking for an organization or a group of organizations with strong marketing support that can stand up a robust plan with social media or other means to reach people that have needs, but they also need to have the ability to comply with federal reporting requirements, as well as do that performance reporting. We want to see if this program is working and making those connections so that it may be continued beyond the first 12 months, a demonstrated ability to collaborate, and then focus on those adversely affected or historically underserved populations. We're expecting responses back mid-October, do an evaluation, and bring that to the County Commission for approval of a partner to deliver a Community Navigator program first part of November. That's a pretty high-level summary of where the county has been and is as we deal with the American Rescue Plan Act. I would entertain any questions or comments at this time.
Okay, Brent, thank you. And just as a kind of you might address the fact that this ARPA round has very strict Department of Treasury requirements and somewhat limit us in what we can and can't do. But we have been made aware a number of times that there's other federal programs that are either being released now or real short future to address some of the needs that some of we're all receiving from businesses and individuals. If you want to expand on that a little bit, and then we can take questions.
Certainly, Chairman. As was mentioned, there's $1.9 trillion in the American Rescue Plan Act, money through the Economic Development Agency, money through Housing and Urban Development, money through a lot of different federal programs or federal agencies. And the COVID task force has been put together and then set up in these subcommittees to look at different funding opportunities. I know that some of the groups have talked about making economic development grants, and so there are a lot of other activities going on. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do, is be deliberate and make sure that we understand the entire landscape rather than just allocate these funds where there might be another place that would come in and take care of it, and these could be used in a different place. So there are all sorts of deadlines. I know that we're working on one right now that has a deadline this month for a first round of an economic development grant for a bigger possibility in March. So, and all of them come with a lot of reporting, both fiscal and performance reporting requirements.
Right. Thanks for expanding on that. Okay, questions for Brent? Anybody? Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you give us a little better breakdown of the $20 million in premium pay? And specifically, was there any kind of allocation to the cities within Sedgwick County, to the first responders that work for all the cities in the county?
The $20 million that was allocated was all to county employees. We developed a tiered program so that employees that were required all the time to be on the front lines, engaged with the public, then they were exposed or potentially exposed to COVID-19, were in our Tier 1. Tier 2s were folks that were in that public area, but or they were fully, the Tier 1s were 100% of the time engaged in on-site work. Tier 2 employees had some option for remote, but were required to be on-site some of the time. So there was an hourly calculation with a cap on those employees. So it went from people in the detention facility at Tier 1, EMS, healthcare workers, down to some administrative staff that still had public engagement during the period of March of 2020 to March of this year.
So what would the premium for a Tier 1 employee look like?
It capped at $10,000 per employee.
Based on what kind of
How many
formula?
hours that employee was engaged in that work. So we have to look at time records. We couldn't just say, if you were in this category, you got $10,000, because they may not have worked enough public-facing hours to get that pay. So it was an hourly rate with a max based on the type of exposure that they potentially had.
What would a Tier 2 look like?
A Tier 2 might be an employee that works in one of the administrative offices where the public is coming in, filing paperwork, and so they're face-to-face with the public. They may be working just in an office setting and handling papers that have been touched by someone that's potentially exposed. So there were different levels that were outlined in the guidance, and that's what we followed, and then assigned a monetary value to those.
Was that a $10,000 cap too?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Other questions? Yes. Cindy?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about these community navigators. I don't want to steal the thunder from the next presentation, but I know in the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition, we talked coming out of the sequential intercept model training that we had about these community navigators. And so my question is this across all categories of needs that people have, or is it specific to like mental health services or something like that?
Council member, it's basically across any need, and that second bullet point, if you have a need and there's a resource, we're going to try to connect. What we found was that with those priorities, workforce is a big need. So what are the barriers for me going back to work? What are the barriers for me as a small business owner to hire someone? And how can we connect those resources and then determine, was that a successful match? Did they find employment? Did they upskill their employment through a training program, whatever that might be?
Thank you. Can I just add something? So I think the difference, though, between the Community Navigator program that we're talking about with funding and the Community Navigator program with the service providers is Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition service provider Navigator is helping individuals find services. This is finding funding for, so there's a difference between the two. So I understand that term could be intermingled for a lot of different definitions, but I think it's important to understand when we talk about this program, this $500,000 that we have allocated is for community partners to find resources to fund their programs, whereas ours is people connected to services. Does that make sense?
So this is not.
They're different.
Okay, and this is not focused on the individual, is what you're saying?
It's focused on a entity that could have a COVID-related expense that could find the bucket of money that Chairman was talking about at the federal level. It connects those people, those entities with funding resources. Okay, Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
If I might expand just a little bit, Commissioner, I might operate a small nonprofit, and if I went to the Community Navigator, they might be able to connect me with some other available resources that I might need in my response to the pandemic. I might want to stand up a program for which there's grant money available. Or I might be unemployed health care worker that I want to work, but I can't find child care. Where's that resource? So the Navigator connects me with someone that resource can be found.
What's your question, Becky?
No, well, the second example of needing childcare, that is a specific individual and not an entity. So that threw me just a little bit, because I kind of thought I figured it out that there was going to be navigators to help non-for-profits or community-based organizations to find funding that they need. Mm-hmm. And then the other definition of a community navigator, I might not be getting it right, but was the individual's need. But that sounded like it was the same, so that's where I just got confused.
So the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition Navigator, which I don't want to get into it, I mean, we have them coming up, but
sure.
It's focused on mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness.
Yeah.
That's the crux of what that Navigator is going to help people with.
So these navigators may also help individuals in some capacity, potentially.
Potentially.
And then my other question, just because I'm intrigued and I'm interested in this, who would these navigators be? Like, what content expertise would they have in helping non-for-profits and community-based organizations to find funding, to seek funding, and then how would it be sustained when the ARPA funding is ended?
Well, the idea is to find all the money that's out there, and once the money is exhausted,
okay, gotcha.
Then they're done.
Makes sense. But so are these current county employees, or are they going to be new hires? I'm just super
We have
curious.
an RFP out
Okay.
that we're going to hire an organization or entity to help us with this.
Thank you.
Becky, and there's an RFP that's been issued, and Lindsay just said she'll send a copy of the RFP requirements to all of us.
Great, thank you.
And just to piggyback off the current commentary and questioning and discussion on this, it sounded a lot, the Navigator sounded a little bit like what 211 with the United Way does. And
yeah.
For what the Chair Pro Tem, I just want to make sure I get this right, is saying with an RFP, a organization such as the United Way, who is somewhat of a community navigator currently, they could apply to do these services for the county, or is the county, that's what I think I hear, is that an organization can apply to perform these services instead of the county hiring and creating their own services.
So
Is that correct?
correct me if I'm wrong, but this is about funding buckets. This is about finding money that's out in the federal level, about other resources in our community. This is mainly, so if we think about community navigators with this program, to my understanding, and how I'm trying to explain it to community members who are asking me about it, is we're trying to connect them with resources. So what money is out there that is ARPA related that could come into our community from anywhere? That's how I'm understanding it.
Correct, Commissioner. That's
Okay.
one aspect of it. It's basically, I mean, in its simplest terms, it's connecting needs with resources.
Right.
And this pays to make those connections. So the resources that are already in the community or potential that might be in the community.
So in some capacity, my interpretation would be this is almost like a consultant who would work with community-based organizations or not-for-profits to be able to assist them in securing funding that's available.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, other questions? Yeah. Brian?
So, thank you, Brian. On the internal needs assessment slide, you identified 39 million of the 43 million that you've decided to spend, but that remains about 7 million unknown. Where's that going, and have you talked about that dollar amount purpose?
The current spending plan is for that 42.9 million. Now, the numbers that were up there were 38, 39 million. There's some additional money for PPE, some administrative things, supporting remote work, other internal spending. We've got a contingency built in. And then beyond that, we have not developed a spending plan for the additional part of that first tranche.
Very similar to our impact initiatives that we've identified of 20 million.
Yep.
Okay.
Certainly.
Right. The luxury we have this go-around is that we're not on a, CARES money was a deadline of get it out there in 7 months and spend it. And so this provides a lot more evaluation, a little more discipline to our decisions all jointly. And we may find, obviously, that's what this is about, is some of this gray area money that's sitting there. Do we have a joint investment or a need in our community that we could team together with?
Correct. Chairman, that one was a sprint, this one's a marathon.
Yes. Yes. Marathon is easier for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Tom. Well,
One question from a staff perspective. When we look at the external needs assessment as well as the focus group assessments, there are categories where we have, I think, mutual priorities. And so the question is, do you want staff to work together? For instance, we're already starting to work on criteria for small business assistance programs and also for workforce. And workforce obviously is identified by your priority process. Child care services is something we've been looking at as a workforce issue as well. So the question is, do we want to come up with one set of criteria and pool funds in order to be able to, in a cooperative way or in a coordinated way, to allocate funds, not just this coming year, but also for
Bob, I think that's a great idea. I think we would all be in agreement on that. I'm looking at our ARPA lady and our ARPA guy, and they would agree that that's a perfect area for us to have staff work together, come up with a number that we split or whatever, or we proportionally share. I think that'd be a great idea.
I think I heard the presentation also some discussion about housing and work to help with the homeless and those that are challenged in that regard. And that would fit in well with our affordable housing fund. And we're also leveraging, we think, some other ARPA dollars that are not a direct allocation this way, but through our home program that would help us in terms of targeting low-income residents, especially those who are either homeless or are on the verge of homelessness.
Vice Mayor Johnson, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to know, what is the community violence intervention funding? What type of programming or efforts will that be?
We haven't defined what that effort is at this point. It was an external need, and that was that community violence intervention was more specifically identified as housing insecurity, homelessness, affordable housing, the things that the manager just spoke to. But that was the specific focus of that community violence intervention. So the need was to address those programs that would help with those areas, but it was pretty laser focused on housing.
Okay. Is there any way, just looking at, even with some of the increase in violence with our young folks, that you could kind of identify some behavioral health or counseling to go with that? A lot of what I've seen is a lack of ability to communicate without grabbing weapons or handling disagreements, things like that, and not sure if many of those young folks have access to those services or if that's even a thought.
And I think that was, the fourth priority in terms of those increased mental health needs as students are going back to school and families are dealing with that new stressor, as well as things that have gone on in the home with domestic violence and things, because the incidence of those things also increased. So clearly a need. And I think the thing to remember is we can correlate increases in these types of behaviors over the period of time of the pandemic, then that makes it much more ARPA eligible, so we can focus on those areas.
Okay. My final question, not sure if the community health focus group kind of brought it up, but Councilmember Tuttle and I have been talking about food deserts, of course. Mm-hmm. Was there any discussion about helping with that, or ideas around funding some initiatives to support food desert or following the food master plan or anything like that?
And if I can maybe chime in, I was going to wait for the community discussion, the discussion part, but you and I are thinking along the same lines. I think all of us would agree that COVID really shed light on food insecurity and food deserts in a different way, and the issue was brought up to many folks. Some of us have been working on it for more than a decade, but for many it was the first time that they see empty shelves in grocery stores, right, and not getting access to fresh produce that 25% of our population deals with every day. And then we also had the recent grocery store closing in District 1, which again just brought more emphasis to this need. We've had a workshop between the county and the city, both on the Wichita Sedgwick County Master Food System Plan, and because of the food desert initiative, the catalyst with the grocery store closing, some of the work has been done. We're still anticipating the master food plan to be adopted and implemented, and we have been working with a consultant, and we're really focusing on initiatives that would be scalable and sustainable. So not thinking about staff, probably not thinking about purchasing actual food, but what infrastructure or what could be used. And we're working with a couple different groups who specialize in this already, so not trying to create a new footprint, but utilizing the resources that are already there. So I'm extremely hopeful that somewhere food and addressing our food deserts can be brought up as a topic of discussion. So thanks for your consideration.
So I have a question. Just when we talk about money going into when we talk about employee retention with some of the bonuses that the county has allocated, I think it's a timely topic to ask about the ICT-1. A couple of months ago, we had an update at the council about the progress of ICT-1, while also the staffer who was presenting it made a comment about how we really can't scale up ICT-1 at this point because of staffing issues. So is there any resources being put in that would help us with some of our current joint efforts, such as ICT-1 with our integrated services, so that we could bring this more from a pilot to more of a mainstream program?
The premium pay portion of ARPA was a look back at how to compensate folks that were on the front line, those first responders, those essential employees. So we'd have to take a look, I think, specifically at that to see if there was a way to determine eligibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Howell.
Do you want to add about our bonus?
might just mention also, Mayor, that the county has gone through an extensive reclassification process of pay and marketing. We're also going the route of some signing bonuses, not speaking specifically to the ICT one components of EMS and ComCare. So we have a multifaceted strategy looking at workforce in the county. And then just one other thing I wanted to mention to chime in on what Mr. Layton said. There's also a partner not in this room that we have to maintain connections with, and that's the state of Kansas. We received over $1 billion of ARPA funding as well. So all of this, I'm glad to hear that we're going to work together on some of these components, but we can't forget our state partners who also should be at the table so that we don't, or we are not redundant on what we provide to the community, also don't miss any gaps. So thanks.
Good point, Tom. Yeah, Commissioner Howell.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And first of all, I kind of wanted to wait till now and hear both briefings because I think this is the best time for asking questions. So I actually have some questions possibly for Wichita as well, but let me start with you. First question is, can you, maybe I missed it, but I don't think I did. Can you please explain makeup potpourri? It's on our briefing, but that kind of surprised me, that term. What does that mean in that slide? Makeup potpourri.
Can you repeat the question, Commissioner?
What does makeup potpourri mean on the focus groups?
That was, we had some folks that were specific to those industries that weren't able to make the focus group on that day. So we just had a makeup session.
Okay.
So it encompassed everything.
Well, that makes more sense than makeup.
Okay.
Like at Walmart.
I was thinking, all right, I'm going to the county.
I'm not alone. We all thought the same question. Nobody asked, right? Thank you for helping me out with that.
The only bad question is a question not asked.
Well, that's not true. Okay.
Commissioner, that was a consultant word we used, so.
Well, that makes so much sense. Thank you for that. I am curious, other municipalities that received ARPA funds, I think that those municipalities that exercised their critical pay programs, that was a municipality-based program. In other words, it would be a little bit, I'm not sure if the city's asking whether we would use our $58 million for critical pay for other than county employees. Is that what's being thought through here? Or what I'm wondering is we use some of our ARPA funds for critical pay for county employees. And that's fine. I assume other cities may have done the same thing because this was described by the administration, if I understand correctly, when this ARPA funds came out, $1.9 trillion, one of the things they talked about from the very beginning was critical pay for frontline workers. And every municipality that received funds could have done that if they chose to do that, including like the hospital, for example. They're talking up to $25,000 bonuses, or I should say critical pay, for medical staff, for example, because of COVID. So everyone that received ARPA funds had that option to do a critical pay program. Is there ever a case where a municipality would receive funds and would move that money out to something other than their own employees? Is there something that, is that something that's on the table today? I'm trying to understand what is this discussion about? I heard several comments today about $72 million is allocated in the city, and it's kind of all earmarked. It's all determined as to where it's going to go, and there's $58 million not determined in the county. And there's discussion about critical pay for, we used it for county employees, and now there's city employees. In fact, some of them have reached out to me, and they're wondering, it seems inequitable to them, and again, they're constituents, so I would certainly want to advocate for constituents as well, but it's hard for them to understand why one municipality would do something like this, and the other one basically, I guess I'd like to ask, was there a discussion at some point about critical pay on the city side? I mean, there's an equity between how we did ARPA funds and how the city's done ARPA funds, and to the employees, it's a little bit confusing and concerning. They're trying to figure out what's going on, and with the comments made this morning, I'm wondering, with the $58 million not allocated yet, is there some desire to use it that way? Go ahead.
Can you, perhaps we'd be better served if you had an example of a city government in Sedgwick County who has used these funds for direct pay to current employees, and then we could maybe figure out what they were thinking. Is there an example of that? Is there I don't know standard we're citing?
There are 20 cities in Sedgwick County. I don't know what they've all done. I have no idea, but I just know what we did, and I believe that municipalities that received funds have this option. As I understand the program, it's any municipality that received funds could do a critical pay program if they wanted to, if they felt that there was a need. That's a policy choice of those governing officials. They can do that if they want. So we went down that path. I think we had a 5-0 vote, I believe. I'm not sure what the vote was now, but we went forward and we could have gone as high as 25. We didn't do 25. We did 10, and it was a $10,000 cap. We earmarked $20 million out of our $100 million. I don't think this is going to happen again next year when we get the rest of the funds. But out of the first $50 million, we earmarked $20 million for critical pay program in the county side, and I'm glad we did that. But I assumed that every municipality had this discussion. I guess I'm just asking, what was the perspective of the city? Did they even have this discussion? Because I'm getting questions from city firefighters, for example.
Well, and I'm gonna follow up my question, but then we have a council member who wants to jump in. But I guess to go back to my original question: has any city had these talks, or is this more hypothetical? Like, is any other of the 20 cities?
Mayor, I don't know the answer to that question. I only know that what we did here. I know that I've had employees in the city ask me questions about why is this different in the city and the county. So I'm trying to, I guess, on behalf of those employees, ask this en banc group. There is a discrepancy between city and county. In fact, it's not just that. There's a few other things in here. And I love the presentations, by the way. But the way that we approached spending $100 million is different, vastly different than what the city has done. The city used DAB boards. They've earmarked the funds. All $72 million is now got a home. We are kind of going through a process. We've earmarked, I think, $43 million, and the rest of that is now to be determined. The process is ongoing. And if I was going to, Lindsay's here, I don't know if she would agree with this or not, but I think we have way more requests than we have money. So we're not going to be able to give everybody what they want. It's going to be one of those things where we've got to go through a process, and it's going to take some time. We have some time. We have until the end of 2023, I think, to decide what to do with this. And so it's interesting to see the difference. One of the differences that popped off the page to me is that the city is using ARPA money for the smart manufacturing and digital transformation. I believe we have a plan next week to do an agenda item to discuss doing that, but we're using property tax dollars. This is one example. And I'm welcome to comment on that, but clarify, is that true?
Well, to be clear, these are buckets that we've identified as possible categories for spending. Nothing has been committed. We've got about $30 million between the impact initiatives and the general fund support that is not committed directly to anything yet, just ideas.
Okay,
so
that
for consideration and thought.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. That does help. Thank you very
Commissioner,
much.
if I could just interject, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
Brent referenced, we had, as the county, meetings with all of the other cities, and I don't think that any of them talked about pay. They don't have a lot of money to, 12 million was divided between 19 cities. I think Derby got 3.7. So this is, what they do is what they do. If I could get us back to county and city discussion would be better, but that's just the background. You did, Brent, do you have anything to add to
That's right, Chairman. And
infrastructure?
Infrastructure was
is
the
what they were
theme that
wanting.
we heard from cities. I have not heard from a city talking about premium pay. They might want to use their allocation for that. But in terms of the braided funding that was mentioned earlier with cities, that was potentially infrastructure, water and sewer projects was the thing the theme that we heard.
Okay.
I think Councilman Blubach wanted to enter this discussion as well.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. And the questions I asked here, I'm probably getting the same phone calls you are, and I'm just bringing up the same issues that I've had. I don't remember us having a public discussion about premium pay. And I didn't know about it until our firefighters started calling us, and they were asking me the same questions. Is the city going to have this allocation? Is the county paying for any of the city? Those were all questions I've been asked.
And I guess I'll go back to, because I'm interested in this line of questioning where it's a questioning of the city on why we haven't done what the county's doing, but I still am interested in, has any city done it? And if not, then, that would put us in the category of what other cities are doing. Our line of thinking would be in line with the other 20 cities in the county. So So I'm just interested in, are we expected to be the outlier?
So, thank you, Mayor, for that. I would just say this probably isn't in our wheelhouse. It's probably more on the city side. If you guys wanted to do some research on that and maybe potentially reconsider that, I think that'd be a great thing personally, but it's not, obviously not a county problem at this point. So, but I would encourage the city basically to hear a commissioner say, I've had your employees contact me, and they're worried, and they're concerned about why was this done differently. So I just want to share that with you. And then I do want to say, I appreciate what Manager Layton said and Chairman Meitzner about working together. I wish that we could turn the clock back a little bit and maybe 6 months or 8 months ago and say, or 6 months ago, and say, let's kind of do this together, because our approach to this is obviously very different. And the focus that the city's had is a little bit different than the focus that the county's had. And although that's interesting, I think we had opportunities there. We could have done this differently, and I wish we would have done it differently. I think this ship has sailed. We're not going to be able to go back and undo what's been done now, but I think the county will likely just continue what we're doing with our $58 million that's left to figure out, and we'll continue that. I do have one question, though. Since we're not really coordinating and we're not really consolidating on these funds, how do we know whether someone in the community is applying for some support from the city or the county? Is there any type of mechanism to prevent double dipping, in other words, getting money from both, or the state?
Commissioner, under the system that I was proposing, we would be coordinated so there would not be double dipping. We would actually participate in a single program for small business, a single program for workforce development, and then not sure how we would handle housing, but that's how I anticipated. So you applied to the two jurisdictions together in one program.
And I guess my final question would be this. The very first slide on the city side said that they're going to replace lost revenue potentially. They lost $28.3 million. I assume that's sales tax funds primarily. Maybe there's some grant funds as well, but I assume most of that sales tax funds. And if they're able to use some of their $72 million to replace the lost revenue, is the county going to do the same thing? I think we lost around $10 million similarly. And I say the word lost. It's actually not really lost. It's just lower revenue than expected in a normal year. So I hate to use the word lost. And nothing was lost. It's just there's not as much revenue because of COVID, I assume. So the question is, are we going to use ARPA funds, $10 million, to replace lost revenue on the county side?
Commissioner, I think those are questions that we will have into the future. Part of the interesting component of listening to this dialogue is we don't have everything figured out yet. I don't think either side does. These rules from Treasury are evolving. We're still having dialogue with the community. I think it's good that we have this en banc to sit and have this preliminary discussion, but I hope we all understand we don't have it all. Staff doesn't have it all figured out yet. We're listening very carefully to the words that you say today, and we'll craft and compose moving forward. But those are all discussions, I think, and as I think the chairman or mayor mentioned, we can be very thoughtful with this money. We're not in a speed race here. We can sit back and be very analytical, have a lot of discussion, have a lot of communication, and hopefully at the end of the day, do what's right by the community. So,
thank you, Manager Stoltz, and thank you, Mayor and Chairman Meister, for the chance to speak this morning.
Brent, did you have anything to add about the audit process or the duplication? If somebody tries to, quote, double dip?
To the extent that any of these dollars coming from ARPA are governed by the federal guidance from the Treasury, an applicant that would attempt to double dip would be subject to criminal penalties. There's reporting mechanisms in place back to the federal government. So it's, and as we're working together with the city and with other partners, that's one of the mechanisms to approach that.
Okay.
I just have a quick
questions. Yeah.
Question. Chairman, Commissioner, do you want to go first? You can. Okay. I'm just curious, and I appreciate the comments from Commissioner Hull about wanting to collaborate, and I think for moving forward, we absolutely should. I think it's best for the community. I'm just curious if either city manager or county manager has there been some thought or intention of what that's going to look like? Is it going to be staff-led, or, and I'm just curious as to next steps when we leave here. So, thank you. And then also, I'm going to put another plug in for food again. So even if it's not part of the community-city collaboration, I would enjoy conversations with my city colleagues, just because this is definitely a need, and I think an ideal fit, and also an ideal time to address this. So thank you.
Okay, yep. Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I really do appreciate the fact that we're getting back together again in a non-banc. If you remember my comments at the last non-banc as we were wrapping it up, is that we need something as all of this money is coming into the community so that we can work together so that we can leverage the funding that is coming in. And I think that that's really what the purpose of today's meeting is to see how we can leverage what we've got going forward. We have $50 million still for us coming that we haven't allocated, but that doesn't mean that there's not super big needs out there that we're going to be taking a look at. Matter of fact, the next briefing is one of our super big needs, so we probably need to move into that here sooner rather than later. But beyond that, broadband, we haven't even spoken about broadband. And we've got huge areas in the unincorporated portions of Sedgwick County that don't have access to broadband. And during the shutdown of the schools and the businesses last year, we had people out in the unincorporated areas that couldn't do their schoolwork, that they couldn't run their businesses because we just didn't have broadband. So beyond that, we're going to talk about mental health and substance abuse here next, and that's something that we truly have to be working as a group between Wichita and Sedgwick County to see if we can resolve that. So I really do appreciate the fact that we're getting back together again. It was my recommendation before, and I think that the outcome of this is going to be very positive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other comments?
Oh, yeah. Councilmember Claycomb.
And I appreciate what Commissioner Howell and what Commissioner Dennis were saying. One of the things, even though we used different approaches to this, what's really encouraging to me was that there are mutual priorities. And I think that's, using two different systems to identify needs in the community and identifying mutual priorities is encouraging to me in terms of moving forward and being able to work together between the city and the county on things that our residents think are important.
And I agree. I think, if we can come together, then we can save money and not duplicate a lot of the same efforts, because it does sound like we align in many ways. So I'm really happy to hear about that. And I do think we need to work with the state, but I think another player that hasn't been discussed yet today is our schools, because they also received a lot of ARPA funding, and last year we really saw the importance that schools play in our community, and making sure that we collaborate with them too going forward, I think is going to be very important. So I just want to make sure that schools are included in some of these conversations. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other comments or questions at this time.
I feel like we already drifted into discussion.
Yes. Why don't we take a 7-minute break, and we'll reconvene for the next presentation. Okay? Thank you.
All right, it looks like we have everyone back. Let's go ahead or I will go ahead and relinquish the floor to the Chairman Meissner for the behavioral health update.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and good morning again, everybody. Thanks for being here. This will be the second of our 2 items today. This is related to behavioral health discussion. We will have a couple of presentations. We have a little bit of, I think there's a PowerPoint that we're going to be involved with, but first off, we're going to have Robin Chadwick join us, and then Brenda Dietzman will be joining us by Teams. So we may have to take a break on the PowerPoint at that time, followed up by Misty Bruckner, and then we will have our discussion.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to receive and file the previous?
We can, yeah. All right, go ahead.
Move to receive and file item A.
Second.
There's a motion to receive and file the first presentation. We have to do that on our side, so no other questions. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz? Aye. Chairman Meissner?
Aye. Thank you. Okay, now we're into the behavioral health discussion. Robin, thank you for being here, and thanks for all you've been doing the last couple of years on this, or your whole career in a way. But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council members, commissioners, thank you so much for the opportunity for our organization to speak to you today. My name is Robin Chadwick. I serve at Ascension Via Christi as the hospital president for the St. Joseph campus. St. Joseph, as you may or may not know, is, quote, the psych hospital for Sedgwick County. So I'll be speaking from that perspective. But I also serve as an executive board member for the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition. And again, thank you for your time today so we can get you up to speed on the work that's been happening. So this is just a brief history, and I'm not going to read the slides to you, but in somewhere around 2018, we had a crisis situation happen at St. Joe where our law enforcement partners dropped a patient off who took 6 law enforcement officers to get that patient out of the car. They got the patient out of the vehicle, left. One of our nurses was assaulted, broken bones in her face, punched multiple times, ended up in the hospital, had surgery. And that kind of led to a firestorm of meetings and a lot of emotion and a lot of anger and a lot of pointing fingers at each other. And that, now in hindsight, I refer to that as our storming phase of group development. But we stormed for about 3 or 4 months. And this was law enforcement, district attorney's office, ComCare, Substance Abuse Center of Kansas, Via Christi, WPD, Sheriff's Office, all of us together in a room arguing. And then after 3 or 4 months, we all realized we were saying exactly the same thing. The system was broken. And that we all, as community providers, needed to figure out how are we going to solve this and create a better system for our community and for the citizens that live in this community. And when I speak about community, I'm not thinking just Wichita, Sedgwick County, because at least for St. Joseph, we draw patients in from probably 10 counties in the south central region. You know, we initially looked to the state to help us, and after a couple of those storming sessions, we really realized this is a local issue. We have got to come up with a solution locally, and then go back to the state with a plan and how they can assist with that. So we have developed a strategic plan. Early on, we contracted with Bothner and Bradley to help us come up with a strategic plan that would span over 5 years. And then in 2020, we engaged the Public Policy and Management Center. And at that point, we really began to move our strategic plan forward. You can see our mission and our vision. And really, if you think of 3 circles, a circle for mental health, a circle for substance abuse, and a circle for homelessness, there's a point where all 3 of those circles intersect, and the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition really was created to work in that intersecting space. Because there's not a one of us in this room that isn't touched by a mental health issue in our family, ourselves. The statistic is 1 in 4 has Americans has a diagnosable mental health disease. So there's probably several of us in this room that actually
have experienced this. So, but between our family, ourselves, there's not one of us that's not impacted by mental health, substance abuse, or we know someone who has had an episode of homelessness. The Coalition Board, I hope many of these faces are familiar to you, but we have representatives from so many of the organizations in Wichita that work in this space, ComCare, Via Christi, Wichita Police Department, Sheriff's Department, City Council, County Commission, Kansas Health Foundation, Sedgwick County DA, USD 259, Substance Abuse Center of Kansas, Humankind, and then many representatives from the private sector as well. Early on when we began talking in the community about this mental health and substance abuse coalition, we got phone calls from many of the coalition members that you now see listed on this board, because so many of the social service agencies were fearful that the coalition was going to take their clients, take their grant funding, take their money, put them out of business. And so we have worked very deliberately and I think very diligently over the last couple of years by holding community sessions and inviting all the service providers and everyone that has a stake in this work to come together and talk with us, to develop trust among those providers and to really help them understand that our vision is not that the coalition will take over the work, but that the coalition will pull the providers in the community together to do the work. One of the things that we have done some work in is a gap analysis. So maybe we have 7 agencies doing the same work, but we've got no agency doing another piece of work that's important. So part of the coalition's work in our strategic plan is to figure out where are the gaps and how do we solve those gaps. But again, a wide array of coalition members. One of the things that was important early on was to get a website. So we have a website, and on that, and we have applied for not-for-profit organization status as a 501c3. And so that is either in progress or maybe just completed. Misty will have to update on that. But on the coalition website, we have put much of the materials and the data that we have pulled together, and really, who are we and what are we about? So our purpose really is to work upstream, because downstream means the action's already happened, the issue has already happened. And so we are really working, trying to move the work upstream so that we can identify those issues and those circumstances that happen in people's lives to cause them to end up in that circle where those 3 things can coincide. This is just really an overview of what all the components are of mental health care. Also in crisis care, where the homeless housing comes into play. Lots of case management in all these various stages and organizations. I'm going to turn this over to Brenda Dietzman in just a minute, and she's going to join us by Zoom. But I want to give you just a quick and brief snapshot of what psychiatric issues in our community look like. Because in the St. Joe Hospital, we live them 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Just this current week, I have been the administrator on call. Each week we have a senior leader who takes call. So the call I got at 2:20 this morning was that we have, in a 31-bed ER at St. Joe, we had 28 patients with admission orders to our behavioral health unit. So that leaves 4 rooms for kids who are sick, anybody that's concerned they have COVID, somebody's fallen down the stairs and broken a hip, your mother gets sick in the night with pneumonia. We've got 4 medical rooms left because 28 of those patients are waiting for admission orders upstairs. Now at Via Christi, we've got 101 private rooms, so it's not like we've got a small unit. If you think back 20 or 30 years ago, there were over 800 inpatient beds for psychiatry in Wichita. But over the years, all the for-profit businesses have gotten out of the work, and we have increased our capacity by about 25, but it's still not enough. When I came to work this morning, that number had grown from 28 to 32. So we have 32 patients in the ER as of 8:30 this morning waiting for inpatient admission. I got a call at about 6:45 saying that an adult psych patient had just body slammed an 11-year-old psych patient. Now, fortunately, the 11-year-old was not physically injured, but I'm sure he was traumatized by that. Every single day, a nurse, a doctor, a security guard, a tech gets hit, slapped, punched, shoved, kicked, hair pulled, bitten by a patient who is waiting in our overcrowded units. The increased incidence of meth in our community has created a level of psychiatric illness that we have not seen before. Meth eats your brain, creates mental health psychosis, decreases your inhibitions, and increases the incidence of violence. We are at a state in our community of crisis. And I hope through our presentation today that you really hear that message and understand that every single one of us in this room has a responsibility as a human being, as a member of the council or the commission, and as a citizen of this community to take action and take responsibility. I'm going to turn this over now to Brenda Dietzman.
Thank you, Robin. We're going to pull up Brenda on Teams. Hello, Brenda. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you, Robin. The stories that you tell always take my breath away. And it's scary. It's scary for so many reasons. So thanks for sharing those stories, and thanks for sharing that information. I also want to thank Ascension for being such a great partner over the past several years to address this issue, and Robin, specifically you as well. Good morning, Commission. Good morning, Council. My name is Brenda Dietzman. I am the project manager for the coalition, and I think we'll just jump into this PowerPoint because we can never have enough PowerPoints, right? There we go. So as we're getting rolling on the PowerPoint, what I do want to say is, like Robin said, in 2019 we developed a strategic plan for the coalition and trying to address this problem overall.
Hey, Brenda, this is Pete.
Yeah.
Can you for the benefit of the city council and the other public can you give a brief background of why you are where you're at and what you did?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank
you for that opportunity. So I'm the retired undersheriff from Sedgwick County, and the last 3.5 years of my career, I was in charge of our jail. And I soon learned, even though I knew it, that was an area where this community really focused some of its behavioral health treatment and problems in. The percentage of inmates in our jail right now is absolutely stunning that come in with substance use disorders and with mental health issues. I think it's around 70% of the people in our jail have some sort of substance abuse or substance use disorder issues, and about 30% of them come in with a diagnosable or diagnosed mental health issue. I can tell you from having been an administrator that we have approximately 80 people that work inside of our jail solely on medical and mental health issues. And That is a small community in there, and I learned so much and became very passionate about this subject because of that. So thanks for the opportunity for allowing me to share that. So getting into the strategic plan, we have 3 different areas that we are focusing on. So coordination, communication, collaboration, access to care, and workforce. That first one, the coordination, communication, collaboration, the coalition wants to provide tools and opportunities to providers to better connect them so that they can do what they are great at, allowing them to be able to work together and providing that communication between them, as well as some tools that help with that. That is what the coalition's goal is about that. And I'll talk more about these different subcommittees here in a bit. The second one, access to care. This is really reducing barriers so people can get to services that they need when they need them. Right? We have 2 subcommittees that is working on this subject, and we'll take a little deeper dive into that here in a bit. The third one is workforce, and we are currently working with a group from KU School of Medicine that was already working on this project, or this subject, and we didn't want to duplicate that effort, so we just joined forces with them, and they are doing the majority of the work on this, but doing some good work and finding out needs and understanding where we can help increase the workforce in these different areas. This is such important work right now. ComCare, the last I heard, was about 42% down in their positions that they have open right now, and this is not a problem that we're going to be able to fix overnight. There's a lot of educational requirements. There's a lot of certification requirements. So we really need to come up with a long-term plan that solves this problem, because it can't be solved overnight. So how do we do that? And I know that we just got done talking about, staffing a preventative program that we know works, but we can't staff it because we don't have the people. So this group is working on trying to help solve that. Next slide. So we've divided this up into 3 different areas in our accomplishments and our future plans. So the first one is the technology and virtual services. I'll take a deeper dive into that here in a bit, but we're working on a shared database as well as a front door, how to get people to the services they need as quickly as we can get them there. And the second is a physical campus. I'll talk about that here in a bit as well. But basically, it's a shared area, centralized location with shared resources to get people the help that they need. This last point is the strategic initiatives. Now, specifically, I want to talk about policy and legislative actions. There's a lot of need to continue, especially after the pandemic, to kind of adapt continuously to these areas as far as legislation goes, as far as policy goes. So the coalition is really working with a lot of different organizations, as well as the community and community partners, to come up with a plan that we can present to legislators, to governmental entities, and say, this is what we need, and having kind of that one voice. So everybody gets on the same page as much as what we possibly can and agree on some policy changes or fixes that need to be made so we can address some of these issues in our community. The next thing is that we have 2 pilot projects actually going on right now involving housing and transportation. Very excited to see how those turn out. And one of the things that we're trying to do here is trying to really look at ways to use taxpayer money, donated money, more effectively in our community. So how can we do that? And so that's these 2 pilot programs that we're working on right now. We're seeing how that can happen. And then as a side note on this, we are also in the process of hiring a full-time executive director to move this entire plan along. Next slide, Misty. Okay, so the two areas that I talked about earlier that under technology and virtual services are the database and the dashboard. So the database, we are looking at a software program out of Johnson County called My Resource Connection, and that would allow providers to share a limited amount of information about a person with other providers after, of course, a client gives written consent to it, so that they can see where those people have received services in the past and be able to work together as service providers to provide better care for that individual. We're very excited about this. I think that this is going to really enhance the way that people do things, and it's really going to cut down on a lot of work for a lot of the service providers, because sometimes people come in and they don't remember where they've received services in the past, and this will allow them to go into a database that, of course, is all done after written consent from that individual, and be able to see where they've received these services, and then be able to contact like a case manager or something there to get further information and to coordinate care for this person. The second point is a dashboard. Now, there are a lot of really great providers in this community that are doing so much good work, but there are a lot of providers. So we're going to work with community partners to find a way through technology and through those community navigators, hopefully, that we were talking a little bit about earlier, to give people a way to find the very best provider to address their problem as quickly as possible. And sometimes it's really hard to navigate this system. So having both the technology option as well as the virtual option is really gonna help that. And then next slide. Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is the concept of a physical campus. Now, there's a lot of really great examples out there. The most well-known, of course, is Bexar County down in San Antonio. I know even a few of you have been out there to kind of witness that operation and kind of see how it works. Our challenge is to come up to what works here in Wichita. So the idea is to have an area where people can go and have contact with multiple providers at the same time. And this is important because I think someone mentioned earlier about transportation, about how we're not a very dense community, so public transportation is very hard to do in our community. So getting people from one side of town to the other to get to a service provider is very, very hard. So if we can have an area that's centrally located, people are at, where people who are in need are at, they can actually go to this one area and get services. Now, we aren't going to take all the nonprofits and put them in one area. That would just be impossible. So what we're thinking about doing, or what we're working on, is coming up with a needs assessment where one service provider may only be on the campus, say once every once a month, maybe 4 hours at a time here and there, but everyone would know that schedule. So that's kind of the concept of physical campus, and we're working on a plan now that works with those multiple providers to determine what will work best for this great county and our cities within this great county. So right now, I'm going to hand it over to Latasha St. Arnaud from Humankind to talk about why it's important to have a campus and the importance of working together. And thank you again for accommodating my remote location.
Thanks, Brenda. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Very appreciative to be a part of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition. I'll first, before I get into the topic of collaboration and coordination, just give you a little bit of overview in my role with Humankind Ministries. So my name is Latasha St. Arnaud, and I am the president and CEO of Humankind Ministries here in Sedgwick County. We are one of the largest providers, specifically in the areas of homeless services and low-income housing. So present day, and I'll be brief, but right now we operate 3 homeless shelters. We serve both men, women, and families. One of the things that makes Humankind unique, there are several, but one of them is that in those facilities, they are either no barrier or low barrier facilities, meaning that we will take anyone. that comes to our door, and we will serve them. Oftentimes, we take the most difficult clients and the most difficult cases, and we have a lot of similar stories as Robin does with her staff and her facilities. The other thing that we're known for is our low-income housing. What makes our low-income housing unique is that we offer permanent supportive housing, and any of you that know anything about housing, really the key is that supportive, meaning that we have on-site support services that they can stay as long as they need, so it's permanent. We operate 155 low-income units, and we serve anywhere from 250 to 300, again, individuals and families with our low-income housing. We also offer other services such as Operation Holiday, which is the largest holiday distribution program here in Sedgwick County, as well as some other services. So I kind of want to get into a little bit of the numbers. I already mentioned about how many low-income residents we're serving every year. We're also serving 1,200 to 1,500 unduplicated men, women, and families in our shelter services, which is significant when you really think about it. So what I think is important, which crosses many thresholds, is that out of those, we see about 70% have a substance abuse disorder of some kind. We also see about 70% have a behavioral health disorder. So 70% of those that come and see us either have a substance abuse disorder or they have a behavioral health disorder. And I'd like to note that 50% have both. When people come to us, they're in crisis, they have no stability, they oftentimes don't have family or friends, or if they do, they've really exhausted, their family and friends have exhausted all avenues for support and helping these individuals. And so it's really critical for either Humankind Ministries or other service provider partners to be able to help those in crisis, also known as high utilizers. One thing I'd like to note too is across all programs we're serving about 15,000 either extremely low income individuals or the homeless. We also sadly are turning away about 6 to 8 callers a day that are seeking help, and we do not have room. We are completely at capacity. We are having to turn people away daily at all of our locations. So we own and operate about 10 facilities just north of the downtown community. Next, I just kind of want to get into, which has already been discussed, and I think Misty is going to discuss it a little bit more, but the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition, we're really trying to talk about a service model that has wraparound care. And this is not a new concept when you look at other communities. Shared spaces, coordinated efforts. We do coordinate with a lot of other providers now, but it's very relationship driven, and it's a hard system to navigate, and it's not working for the clients. It is very, very hard. It's not client focused at all. It's really not scalable either when you look at the way that our current infrastructure and systems work here in Sedgwick County. So what I really want to get into, and San Antonio has already been mentioned, but they're not the only ones. Las Vegas is doing this really well. Omaha, Oklahoma City has some really exciting things happening for them. Other communities our size are really, really making big strides in these areas. So I encourage, Sedgwick County to do the same. One of the things as far as how this all gets done, you can see here on the screen, there are a lot of providers centrally located, both from the west and east Wichita here down in the downtown area. And one factor in these other communities when they come together and they're looking at these issues, it has to be walkable, it has to be bikeable, and it has to be within public transportation. Sedgwick County is not walk friendly, bike friendly necessarily. I know we're getting better with that, but it really has to be in an area that is easily accessible. We also want to keep in mind our other providers and our other friends that are working on these issues. You guys already saw the huge list. We are all trying to make a dent in this, but we certainly need your support. So one thing I wanted to note, just the interdependent relationship that Humankind Ministries has with the jail system, hospital systems, ComCare, SAC. We are all dependent on each other to make it work for the client to make it work for the residents of Sedgwick County and the residents of the city of Wichita. And so those entities, among others, really have to work together because we cannot do this alone. Ascension Via Christi has been a fabulous partner, but it is not uncommon for their case managers in the ERs to be calling us, we're calling them, and vice versa. So because what's happening is they get released from the ER system and they have nowhere to go, and then it starts that cycle all over again. So releasing to Humankind Ministries or another provider, just really talking about those collaborative efforts because we are depending on one another, those systems. I want to mention briefly the Studios Project, which is a low-income housing project that the city of Wichita and the county and private citizens as well as the social sector came together to make happen. We just recently opened a 54 permanent supportive housing program. It's specifically designed for the homeless. There's only 2 criteria to get into this housing. So we consider it low barrier, meaning that you can have previous evictions, that you can have a criminal record. One thing people do not understand about housing is the homeless or those that have a behavioral health disorder often have an eviction history or have a criminal history of some kind, mostly due to substance abuse disorders because they've been in and out of the jails. And so housing is not accessible to these individuals, whether they can't pay the application fee or a deposit fee or they just don't qualify for other reasons. So the Studios Project is incredibly unique housing project. I'd like to thank Sally Stang specifically for being a champion of that and making it happen. From the time that this dedicated group identified the gap and went to work on funding and layering funding with with all of the different grants and private donations that we received, it's been 1 year, or I actually say maybe 13 months by the time we identified the need, we found the funding, we went to construction, and we're open. We actually have people moving in on Monday. And that in itself is evident enough that if we all work together, we can address these issues. And so with one final note, and then I'm gonna give it over to Misty because I've had enough time here, but the common thread in these other communities, the common thread with the Studios Project is that they have support from local government. They have support with local government and they are client-focused on how to actually drive outcomes. And so we're not gonna be able to do this alone. You guys are leaders and we appreciate all that you do and we hope that you will stay formed with what we're trying to accomplish. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Latasha.
Good morning, I'm Misty Bruckner with Wichita State at the Public Policy and Management Center. I have the opportunity to work both at the City Council and the County Commission often. I will just say that there's not a tougher issue or subject that we work on than the mental health and substance abuse effort. It is a very complicated system that has been broken for a while with some of our most vulnerable populations. And it is the work that this coalition has done to come together is impressive. But just share with you that there, aside from the human aspect of this, there's a very significant financial aspect of this work. This is a study we have shared with you before, and I'll keep on sharing it because it's important for this to keep in mind what this is costing. So a study that we did on high utilizers, so these are folks that have been either at Via Christi, SAC, or ComCare, a combination of those. During the time period from 2015 to 2018, there were 516 high utilizer frequent flyers that came through that system, costing inpatient care for over $56 million. 17 million of that was either not reimbursed or uncompensated or came from public assistance. That does not even begin to touch the law enforcement and public safety side of this, right? So that doesn't include jail, doesn't include EMS, doesn't include fire, doesn't include Wichita Police Department. There is a huge cost in this system of what we are doing. And these are people that are getting care during the highest point of crisis, right? This isn't ongoing care, and they're circling and coming back into the system. So our role is to try to stop that care at the most expensive level and to make sure that they're getting care that has long-term impact for them. Another study we did that puts this in perspective is looking at what the impact of the crisis center alone and the substance abuse center of Kansas had when you come about it in a way to get people who are in crisis the care they need at a time of impact. What we know in 2019 alone, that there's about a $15 million saving and about $22,000 per patient. It costs less to serve them in the crisis center or at SAC versus going into the jail or going into the emergency room. So a significant financial impact to your organizations, whether you are calculating it or not, it is there, and there's a better way to spend that funding. I would go back just a second on the high utilizers. The population is coming from downtown Wichita. So when we talk about where those services are being provided, about the homeless factor, the majority of the folks that were in this study are coming from this core area of Wichita. So what are we wanting to do from the coalition standpoint? There are two main factors that we want to talk about. We want to reduce the number of mental health and substance abuse emergency room repeat clients. So that toll there of those 516 people that are in and out, the overcrowding that Robin is experiencing, how do we reduce those repeat folks to get them long-term care so they don't continue the cycle of crisis? The other one is to look at the repeat folks with mental health or substance abuse that are being booked into the jail. Because again, those are folks that are in crisis that are not necessarily getting the services that they need, which are costs to taxpayers and local governments for that. So those are the two measurements that we have that we are working on together. So I'll just reiterate where we started. This is hard work and a heavy lift. Just in the past 3 months, we've had more than 35 organizations come together to dig into committee work to figure out how to move this forward. You all know in the public sector, getting 35 entities to come together to work on anything, let alone a topic that is this hard, is a win in and of itself. This is a community issue. Other communities have figured out how to move this forward. Certainly we are on that path now. We want to really thank the leaders on the coalition, the county for their ongoing support, and the city for having us here today. So that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Misty. If I can just summarize, we can go to questions then. Was on the city council for 7 years, and was more comfortable to know that the county was taking care of many of these items that you've just seen today, the comm care, the substance abuse, things like that. What I've learned is that Sedgwick County, we have 20 cities, as has been talked to before. All the cities are taxpayers, and that tax income helps pay for comm care and all these services to supply the region and their citizens in their respective cities. The mental health and the substance abuse, you can see all the efforts that's going on. The Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition, thank you, Cindy and Sarah, for serving, representing the city. Lacey. I said Sarah. Sorry about that. Well, I was on a roll. Anyway, thank you. So that behavioral health stuff is really being addressed, and coordinating with the nonprofits, United Ways of the world. But one problem that I would like, that we need to work together on is the core that's been referred to with the homeless environment. Buried under the homeless is all of these abuses, substance abuse and things like that. But the visibility that affects our business and our economy and even the humanitarian side is this kind of growing presence of homelessness in the drain on fire and police, and on your police for sure, and fire and the jail. So from a humanitarian perspective and everything else we've got going on, I'm going to offer that we work together to look at this homeless environment in the core. It could be financially, it could be law enforcement, it could be lobbying efforts up at the Topeka to help with a mental state hospital down here, our private, our connections in our private investment world that we have. I don't have the answer, but that's kind of an invitation is what I just wanted to open this up with. So, yeah. Oh, Cindy, you have something?
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, I've been involved, very involved in the coalition's work with Commissioner Cruz also, and with other people that were represented and identified today. I do appreciate the work of my colleagues on council. We have found ways to support this work, like the Studios at Humankind and our coordination with the county and others via Christie, Humankind on that. And as we found out last week when we got our report, we have, you know, spent a considerable amount and plan to spend a considerable amount of dollars on homelessness services. But, you know, this problem, as Commissioner Meissner points out, the problem we talked about today, that we saw the presentation on, manifests itself on our streets and on our sidewalks through people experiencing homelessness. And we see that if you drive around this city, particularly in the core, you see that every day. So I think it is really important that we recognize that partnering with the county on this critical challenge can really make a difference in our community. Commissioner Cruz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. You know, thank you so much for having this discussion. And as many of you have mentioned, the opportunity to collaborate is one of the utmost importance. And that really, truly is the work of the coalition. Is you guys saw on the second page all of the people that the coalition has brought together and the task forces that we've put together, the ancillary committees that we've put together. I mean, we have an opportunity, all of us here, these two bodies of government, to create a legacy that this community can understand for a lifetime. It is an honor to represent this community and tackle some serious, complex problems that really affect real people every single day. So, you know, recently I moved into 67214. That zip code is the poorest zip code in the entire state of Kansas. Daily, so why does that matter to you guys? Why am I telling you this? Because from my own personal experience, my own personal life experience, the history of my family, and now my everyday reality, I see mental illness, homelessness, and addiction every single day from my backyard and from my front porch. So, as people walk by my house, I have conversations. I ask them how they're doing. The other day, I gave a gentleman who had a guitar a new pack of strings because he didn't have the money to buy it, and he hadn't played it in a long time, but he was carrying it around in his shopping cart. So every day, I'm seeing and having these conversations with people from my front porch, and what we all can understand is that there are tangible solutions out there that will not only reduce what is visible, but what are the things that we can't see? And how many people are affected by this that we can't see? So we can create a system of change. There are systems of change that are already created. As many of you have mentioned, we don't have to recreate the wheel here. But for homelessness, mental illness, and substance abuse, we have to look at our criminal justice system as well. This is not, all of these things are so closely tied together, and we have to work to reduce those two kinds of things. So I have all this paper up here because I've been doing a ton of research here lately. And I was pleased to see that in 2006, we had a group of people get together, the task to end chronic homelessness. But that's 15 years old now. But some of the general findings that they have right in here is developing successful plans for public, private, nonprofit, and the business sector of this community with the goal in mind of ending homelessness. Recently, throughout the research that I've been doing, I discovered a woman by the name Dame Louise Casey. She is the chair of the Institute of Global Homelessness, and she talks about, in a discussion on homelessness, as it being similar to an overflowing bathtub. Homelessness is like an overflowing bathtub in the sense that what happens when you walk in the room and you see it overflowing? You need to turn off the faucet. You have to prevent the problem from getting any bigger, and turning off that faucet is one way to do it. Right now, We are simply alleviating the problem day to day. We have food on the street. We have a mobile shower unit. We have shelters. But like our criminal justice system, we have to start and continually think about what is creating the problem and work to develop a system. This is system-wide change work to stop it from happening. We have to tackle the difficult and the challenge, right? Not going for just the low-hanging fruit, which is providing a soup on the streets. We're not talking about easy wins here. We have to get in there and help those who are suffering and stuck in that system. Right now, you guys see it. If you go to 2nd in Topeka, it's there. It's very, very visible. We have people who are out on the streets and they've been there for a long time. And the longer they're there, the more significant problems they have. This solution is not cheap, easy, or basic. And it is way more than just a cup of soup and a hot meal at our local Lord's Diner. It's like that overflowing bathtub that we have to switch it off. There are some things that we can tangibly do. Release of jail times. We have to stop releasing them at all hours of the day. We have to understand that people who go out and leave our jail, do they have a place to go? Just the other day, I saw a gentleman at the QT at Murdoch and Broadway come with bandages all over without any shoes on because he was just released from the hospital. Did he have a place to go? I don't know, because anybody I would think that would have a place to go wouldn't be dressed the way they are. Have you guys gone to Murdoch and Broadway lately to that QT? Excuse me. So we have to work to prevent it, right? We have to dive in and deal with the most difficult. And people are gonna get upset. And unfortunately, system-wide change work is not easy. People are going to be upset because change is hard. And the hard truth that we all have to realize is that there are a lot of people doing a lot of work, but problems are not being solved. I have walked down to Open Door. I have seen the drugs that our homeless people are being subjected to. They are there. And at a place where we think that people are getting help. I have heard stories of those going into that property to get a shower where they scrape off the soap with a potato peeler and give it to that next person. What kind of humanity is that? We have to be clever, creative, and thoughtful to solve homelessness. And we just can't keep doing things to do things. We must work with data and information using technology like the technology that we have established with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition, like the technology that I sent to every single council member, every single commissioner, the Built for Zero initiative that has happened in 14 communities around the nation that have solved and have a functional zero rate. What does that mean? It means they are systematically handling their homeless population one person at a time. We have to recognize that the solution to homelessness isn't just a house. It's not a shelter. We can't shelter our way out of this problem. People need treatment. People need jobs. People need support. COVID has shown us that the funds we have seen that came into our community, we can create solutions like we've done with the studios at Humankind that will provide a supportive place for people to find the things that are, help with the things that are keeping them on the streets. Permanent supportive housing has seen a more than 90% success rate in keeping those who enter the program from becoming homeless. That is from a report from the National Association of Counties and the county's role in homelessness. And you know, quite frankly, this is difficult stuff. People are going to think that it's too difficult to do. But we should be looking at, like the tech program told us 15 years ago, that describes all entities working together, both private, public, nonprofits, and the community, business community, to develop, again, what's smart, what's clever, what's creative, what's thoughtful, that's based on data, a shared data that we can all utilize and work together to understand. And we, as the community of people, must look at using the resources that we currently have, because we have a ton of them. We have a ton of resources. Your homeless outreach team lays them out every day to people. And here's the thing, though. We have to understand that working together, like we're doing today, is really the only way that we're going to solve this. We have to do better. We have to quit those silos of things. Funders who are funding all these nonprofits and they're not working together, how can we keep that system going when we clearly aren't making a dent? If you look at the point in time count, which if you want to talk about the point in time count, does that really capture every single person? No, it doesn't. But that's what HUD tells us we have to do, so that's what we continue to do each year. We didn't even get a chance to do it last year because of COVID. On any given day, I talked to a provider yesterday, in any given year, there's upwards of 1,500 people, up to 2,000 people that are experiencing homelessness each year in this community, but our point in time count only says it's 500. So if you look at that, people are gonna think, oh, there's only 500 people, but no, there are way more people than that are experiencing this problem in our community. Using technology like we've seen to prevent and deal with the most difficult, and understanding that we all have the ability to create a system-wide change that will last. This is doable. I mean, we have to have the thought, we have to think that we can do it. We can get this right, and we can achieve a reduction in the amount of people suffering on the streets right now. Right now, our reality is in our own community is that we have people dying on the streets that are very ill. They are dying very young. They are dying in proximity to other people who are very ill. And for those of us who see what homelessness looks like on a daily basis, I see it from my porch. I had a woman 2 weeks ago come up and knock on my door. She was very distraught and wanted a ride. It's real, and it looks, it's very shocking when you go to 2nd and Topeka. But we can do something about it. So first, we have to really create some actionable goals. What do those goals look like? And so I would ask, as an actionable item from this, is to start with the providers that are doing the work. What do they need? What can we, as a governmental body, with money that we're allocating, because that's our job, right? We're handling the purse strings here. Is there something that we can fund that we can help providers with? There's a couple of asks on the table right now from homeless providers. What are we going to do? And so I would ask that staff, I would ask what are your thoughts to pull homeless providers together, pull not only homeless providers together, but the ICT street team, Shower Up, all of those people who, the outreach ministry programs that are out doing this. What are some lasting things that we can help them with? Like the Built for Zero, could we fund a couple of positions that would only focus on homelessness but get people to work together? Is that something that we could do? Could we enact a MAPS program like we're all going to learn about tomorrow when we go to Oklahoma City? MAPS, they're on their 4th MAPS program in Oklahoma City. It started in 1993. This year they're funding, I think, $40 million for mental health and addiction services. Those are big deals, though, and that takes some guts and courage. And so, thank you for allowing me this 20-minute speech over here, y'all. But I really think that we have an opportunity to do something really big that will make an impact on the lives of those who are in our community right now. So I'm asking for your thoughts.
Well, appreciate the discussion on this. I do want to just somewhat inquire about. Keep shutting this off. Okay. Someone inquire about this topic where we also have a bit of an issue in our community when it comes to domestic violence. And the way our housing director defines homelessness is if you are removed from your house or your home because of a domestic violence situation, you are technically homeless at that point. And when we think about expanding and getting to the root causes of some of these problems, I think that there's a lot of overlap when we talk about crisis care and homelessness that we could also be putting into the issue of domestic violence. Now, I know that 67214 is the poorest district, but I will say that, zip code. But over in 67216, where I live, we have the highest amount of sexual assault in the city. And what we have over in 67217, a situation where domestic violence crisis resulted in an officer being shot, which is all South Wichita. We basically have the tale of two Broadways here. When you go north, we have what we saw there was a map of the 35 plus groups who offer services to people in that area. But then when you go south, it seems like we lack the services that match the data within those zip codes. So as we look towards addressing these problems, I'm hoping that we can utilize some of these services that will work to solve or to help with homelessness. Also, some of those services might work to create a one-stop shop for folks who are experiencing domestic violence, so they can go into the services that they need so that they can get out of dangerous situations. Because this is a community safety issue as well as a humanitarian issue. So with that, I would be somewhat, I guess, challenge the providers and the folks who work in this space to, can we branch out to where the need is, such as in other areas of the city? Or are we still going to concentrate this in one area of the city? And thus, has there been any talk or discussion about going to the zip codes where we are seeing an increase in some of these more violent situations, of expanding services over in those areas as well, so that those who need it can have access to those services? So I love this discussion, and I hope that we can also somewhat challenge our own paradigm on how these services are being delivered, and think about in this pretty much a one-time opportunity with the money coming in from the federal government to make needed changes to better serve the public.
Battery might be dead at this point.
Did you get it?
It's beeping.
That's right. Test. Anyway, as Robin and others said, they have real life. They're touching people from all over the city and the region, the county and the multi-state. So there is some connection into the balance of the city, and same with Latasha with housing people that are from all over. So I think I'm encouraged that I think there's some touch points at least. I'm not sure that there's solutions, but those are clearly sad environments that we're talking about. And I think maybe getting our staff to maybe dust off the plan that's been referenced by Lacey, just to see. I understand after reading it that a lot of those things had been implemented, but there's still some lacking, and maybe we stand up that committee or that to because that really is not about the big picture we had. It's really addressing to end chronic homelessness. So that might be, if we would agree to ask our staffs to kind of dust that off, might be a real positive step if that's in agreement with you all to look at. Other questions or comments from, yes?
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with Commissioner Cruz and getting providers together and looking at needs for funding and what long-term sustainability looks like. Also, to the mayor's point, I think it would be beneficial looking at where our resources are now, as well as maybe where the need is, and if there's a way, working together, we could have some mode of transportation, working with transit, or getting people where they need to go from one area of a lot of resources to another area, if need be. But I think all of that could be looked at, and maybe the Broadway corridor is a space in which we could make some of those investments.
Yeah, Chairman, Mayor, I don't want to put her on the spot, but I'm curious what Robin's response is. She talked early on in her comments about the intersection of homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. And I don't want, we may have a platform here in order to address the root causes as well as, you know, the issue of chronic homelessness. So I'd just like her take on who takes the lead and how we go forward.
Thank you for that question, because I think the work that the coalition has done over the last 3 years, we are trying to take the lead through this coalition work. We have brought together so many of the providers, not only mental health providers, healthcare providers, but all of the organizations that touch any part of those 3 circles. And so I really look to the coalition to lead that work, because we have already, I think, established a trust and a collaboration among so many of those providers. And you're exactly right. We're trying to get to, as I said in my comments, the upstream issues. If we can address lack of training and help with substance abuse issues, help with education, help with mental health issues, all of those things, our end goal is to take someone who's on the street because they are dealing with substance abuse or mental health issues, get them treatment, get them clean, get them in a safe place to live while they do that, get them education through partnerships with Wichita State Tech, and get them a job. Because certainly all you have to do is spend 5 minutes in Wichita and you know everybody in town's looking to hire. So there are plenty of jobs. We need to help get people the treatment and the care they need. I believe every one of us wakes up and we want to do something with purpose with our 24 hours. I bet every single one of you in this room wants that. I think everybody that wakes up on the street wishes they had some purpose other than just to stay alive.
Is there an overlap when it comes to domestic violence services that would fit into some of the services that are being provided for the chronically homeless?
I think in many instances, if you read the literature, substance abuse or domestic violence is going to stem from a substance abuse issue or oftentimes an unaddressed mental health issue.
I think Latasha wanted to answer that. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, well, just to answer the question in general. Well, I think there's 2 questions I probably could answer a little bit here. So 5 root causes of homelessness, if that was what you were asking earlier. So what we see is obviously substance abuse disorders, mental and behavioral health disorders, but the other ones are affordable housing or access to housing, or cost of living, minimum wage, however you want to skin that cat. Trauma is the other one. Domestic violence falls in that, and then generational poverty. So those are the 5 root causes that we see, and when people come to us, they don't usually have one. So if I have a behavioral health disorder, it's very possible it's because of trauma or domestic violence, and so yes, we are seeing that, and we do serve those individuals. I can also tell you confidently we have a street outreach team, and we go all over the city of Wichita and all over Sedgwick County. We actually reach out to people, we coach them, we ask them to come into services, we build rapport so that they can start programming with us, and we do wraparound case management care. So I don't know if that answers some of the questions that you've asked here, but one of the things I will also say as far as taking the lead and what we need to do, when you look at this continuum of care, really it is a street outreach approach. We're meeting people where they're at, when they're in their own communities, whether that be at 3rd and Topeka, Broadway corridor, whatever it might be in your neighborhood, Mayor Whipple. We coach them into services. We meet them where they're at. We have emergency shelter. That has to be a no-barrier facility, because as the second you have criteria for those individuals, we have already shut the door on them. We have to be able to open the door. We have to make it easy for them to access services, which is proven success. There's a lot of research on this. Extended stay shelters or extended facilities, when they're getting that treatment, to Robin's point, and when getting that care, that medical care from ComCare or otherwise. And then there has to be an exiting plan into housing. And what does that look like? So extensive case management, partnerships with other providers. One of the goals that we've had with the Studios Project and that dedicated team is having 3 to 5 providers on site each week with, we're working with Hunter Health, preventative health care, kind of triage. We're working with SAC, we're working with Family Crisis Center. All of them are coming to that facility to help those 54 on site to make it easy for them. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but if that helps a little bit, Bob, to answer your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we go back again in time, and I appreciate Robin's giving us a little bit of history on this, but I started working this in 2016, right after the election. And we brought Leon Evans up from San Antonio. We met out at St. Joseph with a meeting, and we talked about the problem. And really, since 2016, we've done a lot of talking about the problem. And now we've got a perfect storm. We've got an opportunity because we've got a lot of money in Sedgwick County. We've got a lot of money in the city of Wichita to start seeing if we can come up with something. I've made 2 trips down to San Antonio myself. We've taken the Chamber of Commerce down to San Antonio to see what they did down there. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The solution, at least a solution that's working in San Antonio, and it's 3 times as big as Wichita, but we could have a scaled down version of that here in this area. So I hope that we can work as a team on this with all of the funding that's available currently. Sedgwick County, we've got in our CIP to put together a brand new crisis center. And that's one part of it. But the other part of it, honestly, is the homeless problem. And that I really look to the city of Wichita to help us with the homeless problem. As Commissioner Meissner mentioned, we've got 20 cities in Sedgwick County, but only one has a homeless problem. And that is where we need the partnership with the city of Wichita to help us work through that portion of the issue. I appreciate the passion that Commissioner Cruz has on this. All 5 commissioners, and I'm certain that all 7 city council members see the problem. We just now have to find out what we can do as a team to move this step forward. We all need the same passion as Commissioner Cruz has to help us get through this. But this meeting today kind of highlights it. We've got to hear from the providers. We've got to hear from the coalition. We've been able to hear from people that see the issue firsthand. Now we know what the problem is, and we know what we need to do. We just need to put the funding in it to be able to take this to the next step. And unless we have the commitment to do something like San Antonio did and build a haven for hope type situation here in this area, we're going to keep talking as we've done since 2016, and I don't want to see us do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I've only been here since 2018, so.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to, and the mayor mentioned ICT-1 a little bit ago. I wanted to talk a little bit more about ICT-1 and the good things that they're doing in the community. And everywhere I go when we talk about this subject is that the ICT-1 program is severely underfunded and needs to be expanded. So at what point do we stop talking about this problem and start doing something about it? I think the ICT-1 program needs to be expanded into a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. Again, we've heard for the past year, 2 years, however long that the ICT-1 program has been in existence since it was created, it's doing a great job. So again, I would ask, like you asked earlier in your presentation, at what point do we stop talking about it being severely underfunded, and at what point do we find money to foster that program?
The last I heard, the total cost for a 24/7 program, and Joan is in the back, it was about $500,000, but really it's the workforce. It's having the people to administer the program. And so that's the challenge. We have talked about, you got to get people interested in this work. And people don't generally stay in this work because of what they get paid. I mean, you have to have an incredible amount of schooling. You have to have certifications. You're in with student loan debt, and then you leave because you can make more money in private practice. So there's been some other kinds of ideas around tuition reimbursement. This is the policy. This is where the policy arm comes in. Can we work with our state partners to help us with tuition reimbursement like we've seen around the country? And so that's one thing. There's another thing about mental health technicians. Could we create a lower level of person, like a med tech at a nursing home? Are there those kinds of options? But then you have to get people involved in that. So the policy arm of this is very important, which is that committee work with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition is another really feather in our cap, that we are working on this in a way that will create some tangible change. When you talk about funding of these programs, substance abuse, so just last Friday I went to a substance abuse idol. I got to be a judge for people who are in recovery. And I live right across the street from Waco House, which is a Oxford house. And I've been added to a group chat of about, I don't even know how many people are in this group chat. It's crazy. But just yesterday, there was a girl who wanted to stay clean. She's living with her boyfriend, and he started drinking again. And so she needed a place to go because she wanted to stay clean, but she didn't have the money to get in it. She didn't have the money to get in anywhere. So when we talk about homelessness, we got to talk about mental health and substance abuse. Like, they all go hand in hand. So we talk about homelessness in the sense of the visibility. Like, we see people on the street, and so we're like, oh, that's homeless. But really, we should see mental illness. We should see substance abuse, because that's the real challenges that are keeping them there. My father was homeless. He was addicted to meth. These kinds of things are so real in our community that, it's such a big elephant to tackle, right? You can't, what do they say? You can't eat it, I don't know what it is. You guys get my point.
Multiple bites.
Right. But I think, when we talk about this whole thing, substance abuse, Latasha, what did you say? 70% of people have a substance abuse, 70% have a mental illness, 50% have both. What is the next little win that we can get? What are the programs that are already out there that we can get? We talked about Built for Zero. You guys have all seen that. I sent it all to you. That's just one idea of things that are happening around the community. We have a detox facility. In San Antonio, there's a place where you can go and you can detox. And then they talk about maybe somebody goes in there and they're there and it's their 100th time they've come in to detox. And on the 100th time, they decide to go into an actual 8-day program to actually detox. And then they go into a 120-day program to rehab. Those are things that we have to do, and those are programs that we have to put in place. But what's the next step? What's the one next thing that we can get? We have the studios. That was our first win. We got the Crisis Comm Care Center. That's a $15 million investment. Wherever that's going to go, it's going to expand capacity. What's the next win after that? Is it a social service center where people can go and get, they can be walked to the next person? Because what happens is people are told, oh, you have an appointment, but then if you're homeless or don't have transportation, you don't have the mental capacity to get there, people miss their appointments. So I'll get off my soapbox because I could talk about this for a long time, but what's that next win that we get? And I think that we've asked, is it a staff? Are we directing our staff to bring us back? You know, we have incredibly smart people, Joan and Sally, who are here, and Tim, that, you know, live and breathe this. I mean, is it something that they bring us back? Is that the question of the hour?
Managers, you have a way in?
Well, I think Robin got it before and maybe suggest as a way forward now the coalition, now that we have synergy in the room clearly, that the coalition lead next steps on this. I think back for the last couple of years while we've been tackling this in the latest fashion. I think we've been remiss of keeping this group, these bodies, up to speed and communicated with on all the good work that Mental Health Coalition is doing. And I think that needs to happen more either through meetings or through newsletters or some type of communication. And then I think once we have synergy, and if the Mental Health Coalition is empowered now by both governing bodies to move forward and drive next steps on this, I think, Commissioner Cruz, that answers your question. They would drive the next step of this, and they would tell us what to do to move forward with next, I think. So.
And I would just add, I would love for some folks to look into, maybe staff, a plan to also include domestic violence in this as well. As was mentioned, it's a top number 4, falls under trauma, and we have our officers who are putting themselves in danger. One of them was shot, getting in the way of what could have been a bullet meant for a spouse or a child. And it is a issue that is part of the overall social service challenges that we face, and I think that we need to discuss it and talk about this as well if we think about revisualizing what we could be doing with our social services. And frankly, no one's immune to this. We have substance abuse and mental health issues probably contributed to the domestic violence that took the lives of a former mayor's grandson. You know, we can be doing a lot more, I think, in ensuring that our services we're providing are not just are looking at the picture more holistically and not just zooming in on a couple of the results of these issues. We want to solve these issues before they lead to homelessness as well, or before they lead to some of these other situations. So I would just love some, perhaps in our next meeting, some opportunities to discuss perhaps what other cities are doing, what other municipalities are doing to collaborate to utilize these services to address a variety of problems as well.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up some issues that are that really do hit the South Side pretty hard. But as we look at concerns and collaboration and how we're going to grow these services, one thing we need to take into account is the South Side transit is really not as accessible as it is in other areas, and so we need to
non-existent.
Yeah, okay, I'm trying to be as nice as possible here, but we need to expand that, right? So people on the South Side who are struggling with these things can still have the same ease of access to these services that we're discussing today, because right now that's not the case. And I mean, driving home, I'm sure you experience it too. I see people every day that are walking around that are clearly in need of some of these services that we're discussing today. And so how can we make sure that they have the same ease of access that everybody else would have? And so I think the first piece of that is really growing that public transit and expanding it more to the South Side in ways that, you know, right now is just not the case. So thank you.
I checked last week, if I took a bus to work, it would take me 45 minutes, and 2 buses at least, so yes.
Push it in.
I think it's out of bounds. So thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to, so I met with Chief Robert Lee in the city of Derby, the chief of police, back in 2015, and he talked about mobile mental health as being a priority. And it's been on my plate as well from the very beginning, and I know that just in terms of community needs, I'd like to point out there's thousands of people who live in the communities of Oaklawn and Sunview that don't get services from the city of Wichita because they're outside the city of Wichita. So in terms of human need, there's huge human need there. They have transportation problems and job problems and food desert issues, Becky. Substance abuse challenges, domestic violence, Mayor, huge problems. I think 25% of all calls to the sheriff's department are in the community of Oaklawn for the entire county. So those needs are there, and I was excited for ICT-1 initially. I support the concept of ICT-1. I want to continue to say, I may be alone when I say this, but I think we need to be data-driven. And one of the things about ICT-1 was, as it was brought to Sedgwick County, or brought to the city of Wichita, there's essentially been zero changes to the program since the very beginning. And I have challenged us to find ways to make it better, more efficient, more effective. Let's look at the data. And one of the things I did when we developed a CAB board is I asked the CAB board to take a look at this, and I stood back. I didn't say a word. They met several times. They would call it a deep dive into the discussion. They met with Chief Robert Lee, he's not on the board, but he did come in and provide some input. Sheriff Easter came in, I believe other law enforcement officers were there. They went and did a tour of ICT-1. They spent a number of meetings on this and came back with 8 recommendations, of which none have been taken seriously by anybody. And I find that very troubling because I think they did a great job. It wasn't from Jim Howell, it was from the CAB board. And I think those ideas would make it more efficient, more effective. I think that the idea of mobile mental health is very politically popular, but we've got to make it, we need the data to work. And right now, the last report we saw, and I've had 2 full year reports now, the data was essentially the same. The mission of ICT-1 is to treat in place as much as possible and not to have to transport to the jail or to Via Christi or to ComCare. And those numbers, although they do have many responses, typically, on average, is for 30 man-hours per shift, that's 3 professionals times 10 hours per professional, that's 30 man-hours per shift. On average, they treat in place a little bit less than 1 client per day. And that program, last I checked, was around $300,000. And that's maybe not capturing all of the costs because things like the vehicle was donated. For this to be sustainable, you've got to find long-term operations support for this program. So you want to expand that, council member. I would say you have to take it times 3.2 because 40 hours a week is 4.2 man weeks minus the one we're already funding, leaves 3.2 man weeks. And so 3.2 times $300,000 is well over $1 million to make this a 24/7 operation. I am supportive of mobile mental health, but I would also like to recognize that we have a zero-sum game of tax dollars. And we're talking about expanding things like the mental health campus, which I fully support. But I think it's competing for the same dollars. And I think we need to, as a group, figure out what is our number one priority. It can't be all the above. I think we need to prioritize, is it the campus or is it mobile mental health? I think they're competing for the same dollars, in my opinion. I desperately want to make it better. I think those recommendations should be seriously considered by all 12 of us, rather than be just summarily dismissed because it came from my CAB board. At the end of the day, we do have a significant problem in Sedgwick County, and I think mental health services are desperately needed. The question is, where do you get the biggest bang for the buck? And I'm going to guess, I think the mental health campus is probably the number one thing we should be focused on. Not that I don't support mobile mental health, I do. I want to make it better, and I don't think that we have been as data-driven as we should be. There needs to be identified a revenue stream to support this. I think the community needs to be asked, do you want to support a revenue stream for mental health services in Sedgwick County? To use existing tax revenues, I don't know if it's ever going to work. And finally, again, as I said, I think these are competing for the same dollars. We have a zero-sum game of tax dollars, and I definitely want to do what's best for the people, but I want to make sure we're being data-driven. And I think right now, the desire to make that 24/7 is very good, but I think that we need to decide whether that's the number one priority or something else. Let me also mention, I don't think anybody else has talked about this yet, but we talked about a mental health court. We've set up essentially the courthouse to create a mental health court, which right now doesn't exist in the courthouse across the street, and a veterans court as well. So there's money, at least there's a desire to provide those spaces. The programs are not stood up yet, but those are also in the works. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, if we can kind of circle this up, it looks like we all have a collective appreciation and a confidence with the coalition. So can we ask the coalition, as a group, we authorize the coalition to work directly with our respective staffs to help prioritize, help make the best recommendations, and then staff can regurgitate that and bring it back to our respective bodies for approval, be it financially or whatever it is. So, Misty, I know this is a challenging deal, but I think the coalition has done so much good work, and I think if they work with our staffs, it'll be a
We appreciate that. We appreciate your support, and look forward to working with staff. They are involved now as well as electeds, and we will continue to do that and take this feedback today and continue to do that. We are hiring a full-time executive director, so we're excited about that, to have that increase the bandwidth of the coalition, and look forward to working with all of you. That would not have been possible without Via Christi Ascension stepping forward with financial support to do that. So I want to make sure, Robin had to leave, but I want to make sure we recognize that as well. So thank you all.
Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. Well, we've been meeting now for 3 hours today, and I don't want us to walk away with a receive and file like we normally do, because this is too important to receive and file. So I'm not sure exactly what the way forward is, but I think we need to turn it over to our staffs and come back with some recommendations that we can implement. We need a commitment from both city and the county to help fund whatever the recommendations are as we move forward. So I don't know if it's appropriate to make a motion that all 7 and 5 vote on, or we just commit to doing that. But we need to kind of wrap it up and have some kind of an action that we're asking our staffs to move forward. We've talked about it. We need some action at this point. Thank you.
So can I make a motion to direct city county staff to work with substance abuse, mental health and substance abuse coalition to formulate a plan and bring it back to us? Would that be appropriate for us to then schedule another en banc meeting?
Can we have like a 60
I think we have consensus to direct staff. That's usually how we can direct staff to consensus, and consensus is really defined through silence, and it seems like there's not the majority arguing against this. I think a motion would probably be in order. Is legal here? Are we good? To make it more concrete?
Motions would need to be separately for each governing body.
Okay. So maybe I believe, is there any objection from City Council to move forward with the plan to have staff work together and come up with ideas in a collaborative fashion? See no objections, and thus through consensus we have directed staff, and then give it over to the chair pro tem. And if you make a motion, go ahead.
Motion to direct staff to work with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition, return to us in 60 days for a plan.
Second. Motion is second. Any other comments? Being none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez. Aye. Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meister.
All right, so we are in consensus with the county, and thus we look forward to seeing what the collaborative approach, working with our staff and with our stakeholders in the community, comes up with, and hopefully get that report within 60 days.
Okay, so that would that mean that we could plan an additional follow-up within 60 days?
I don't plan anything without asking Janet first, but I'm sure we can shoot out an email to make sure that within that time frame we can agree on a date in which to come back, and I'm sure that that's something that staff is. I'm getting the nod. Then yes, we will make every attempt to do that.
Okay.
Further discussion. If there is none, we are technically still in the meeting of the city, in which I will have to make a motion for us to go in executive session. We will do this.
Actually, I think we can handle that in a different way. It's been a long morning, so we'll.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need the executive session.
You can text me. You don't have no.
We just made that
so no
decision on the
executive
fly.
session. So if there's no executive session and we'll handle this next meeting, then the city will need a motion to adjourn. I don't know if the county can adjourn without that, but I'll make a motion to adjourn to the city, and then we'll hand it back over to the county.
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We're adjourned.
County, we just adjourn.
It's kind of like the opposite, like in the...